We usually imagine belief as a clean road. First, evidence appears. Then a person reasons. Then the person reaches a conclusion. That is the ideal. But many of the strongest beliefs in human life do not begin that way. They begin as inherited stories. How a belief learns to defend itself. First, the story enters before testing. Before we are old enough to test them, some stories enter us through trust, through family, elders, school, ritual, convention, community, and authority. The story is not first experienced as a theory. It is experienced as home. That does not make every inherited story false. It means the story arrives before the person has built the tools to examine it independently. Human beings survive by testimony. None of us verifies everything alone. The danger begins when trusted testimony becomes untouchable authority. At this stage, the person is not saying, "I have tested this claim." They are saying, "The people I trust told me this is true." Second, the belief becomes part of the self. The story does not remain a sentence in the mind. It attaches to identity. Now the belief is no longer just an idea. It becomes family, belonging, sacred value, and the moral ground beneath the person. Groups also teach which answers are rewarded and which doubts are punished, sometimes softly, sometimes with exile, shame, fear, or loss. Years of loyalty, obedience, sacrifice, prayer, public defense, and reputation make revision feel expensive. The belief is no longer alone. It is tied to a life. Then evidence enters the room. A contradiction appears. A victim speaks. A historical fact surfaces. A moral comparison exposes a double standard. A source says something the inherited story cannot easily absorb. If the belief were isolated, the person could examine the evidence. But the belief is not isolated. The evidence now threatens belonging, sacred meaning, moral status, and past cost. This creates cognitive dissonance. My system is righteous, but this evidence shows harm. Then belief perseverance begins. One defense weakens, but the conclusion survives. Another argument is found, then another. The mind is not only asking, "What does the evidence show?" It is asking, "What will happen to me if I admit what the evidence shows?" This is the turning point. In a healthy process, evidence moves toward a conclusion. In a defensive process, the conclusion becomes protected first. The protected conclusion may be, "My leader is good, my scripture is perfect, my party is righteous, my family never lies, my movement is pure, my nation is innocent." Once that conclusion is protected, the hidden question changes. Not, "What does the evidence mean?" but, "How can this evidence be read so the protected conclusion survives?" The protected conclusion and the justification process are intertwined. The conclusion supplies the destination. The justification supplies the route. That is why the protected conclusion enters at stage 4. Stages 1, 2, and 3 create the pressure. Stage 4 is where pressure begins to control how evidence is read. Now the evidence passes through a filter. Motivated reasoning becomes the engine. The person reasons toward the answer the identity-bound system needs. Confirmation bias becomes the gate. Friendly evidence is welcomed quickly. Threatening evidence is slowed down, cross-examined, isolated, softened, doubted, or dismissed. The same source may be trusted when it supports the system and doubted when it embarrasses the system. The same moral rule may be strict for outsiders and flexible for insiders. From the inside, this can still feel rational. The person is thinking. The person is using arguments. But the reasoning is being pulled by the protected conclusion. After the filter, the defense kit appears. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy draws the target after the shot. The outcome is fixed first, and the standard is adjusted around it. Special pleading creates exceptions for the favored leader, text, family, party, nation, or group. Semantic retreat changes the meaning of words when ordinary meanings become costly. Harm becomes discipline. Coercion becomes protection. Failure becomes a test. Moral disengagement reduces the pressure of seeing the victim clearly. The harm is minimized. Responsibility is displaced. The system remains clean. The halo effect wraps the favored figure in prior reverence. Because the figure is already assumed righteous, every act is interpreted charitably before the evidence is weighed. These defenses are not always deliberate lies. Often they are sincere arguments built by a mind trying to keep a world intact. Now notice what the defense is really protecting. The defense is not only protecting a conclusion, it is protecting identity. If the conclusion falls, the person may fear losing family, community, reputation, moral innocence, years of sacrifice, and the feeling that their life was built on something trustworthy. That is why humiliation rarely works. Humiliation attacks the very identity the defense is trying to protect. This is why the defense connects back to stage 2. Stage 4 filters evidence, and stage 5 builds arguments. But the deeper protected layer is identity attachment. The better question is not only, why do they reject the evidence? The better question is, what would accepting the evidence cost them? Finally, the system closes. Epistemic closure means the knowledge system decides in advance which sources are allowed to count. Approved insiders count. Outsiders are corrupt. Defectors are bitter. Neutral standards are hostile. Critics prove the need for the system. This is the wall that prevents correction. The system does not have to answer every challenge if it can disqualify the challenger first. At that point, the belief is not merely defended. It is sealed. But closure is not the end. Closure feeds the next cycle. It sends the person back to the inherited story with stronger fear, stronger loyalty, and stronger suspicion of outside correction. The next time a story is handed down, it arrives with a warning already attached. Do not trust outsiders. Do not listen to defectors. Do not apply neutral standards. That is why stage 6 loops back to stage 1. Epistemic closure strengthens the next inherited story before the next person has a chance to test it. Inherited story, identity attachment, evidence pressure, protected conclusion, evidence filter, defense arguments, epistemic closure, back to inherited story. The purpose of this map is not to mock belief. The purpose is to make the mechanism visible. People deserve dignity. Claims deserve testing. Victims deserve protection. Rules deserve consistency. The central question is simple. Before we know who the actor is, what standard applies? If the standard changes only after the protected person, book, party, family, nation, or group is named, we are not watching neutral reasoning. We are watching loyalty reasoning. And once we can see that, the system becomes less invisible. That is where detachment begins.